June 26, 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, effectively ending 50 years of federal abortion rights. You might also be wondering what this has to do with DEI. It illustrates the many facets of DEI and how to bridge those gender gaps with different perspectives. We are excited to have you here with us today. I am looking forward to you all meeting my guest. We value your feedback and opinions. Please drop them in the chat and comment boxes on social media. We intend to respond to as many questions from our audience as possible. This takes a great deal of effort to pull off, so I'm eternally grateful to all of my loyal audience or guests. Follow Diversity Connects Us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a DEI consultant and EQ coach and authoress of Emotional Intelligence, a toolkit for managing diversity, equity, and inclusion. The link to purchase the book will be in the comments. For a living, I help organizations implement DEI plans and reframe their cultural mindsets through thought-provoking speaking engagements, workshops, and webinars. Join us as we share the different voices in the DEI space. Today, we have an amazing guest. Her name is Dr. Pert. We're going to bring her on stage. Dr. Pert, if you can introduce yourself, how are you today?
I'm well, Rachel. I'm well. Good to see you. Good to be here. And thank you so much for having me. Yes, for your guests and your audience who are tuning in, my name is Dr. Carrie Ann Peart. I am originally from Jamaica. I currently reside in sunny South Florida. And I also operate in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion work with the intersection of mental health, well-being, and identity. So I look at it from that complementary angle of cultural intelligence to Rachel's emotional intelligence component as well.
Right, that's great. Today's topic is going to be a little fiery, I believe, but we're welcoming all our listeners to post their comments in the chat box, and we'll answer as many comments and feedback as we can. So let's just jump right in.
Sure.
Do women have a right to privacy when choosing to have an abortion?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the right to privacy is just a fundamental human right. Not just when it comes to abortions or reproductive health and justice issues. It is a fundamental core right, just as it is a right to have housing, clean water, fresh air, and food.
Right.
So, yes.
Right. In 1969, just to give everybody a little bit of context, a woman under the alias Jane Roe
Mhm.
challenged a Texas law that outlawed abortions. So the
Yes.
case eventually reached the Supreme Court, where Roe argued that the Constitution protects a woman's right to privacy, which is what you were saying,
Mhm.
in having an abortion.
Mhm.
So in a 7-2 decision, the court ruled that the right to an abortion fell within the right to privacy, which was protected by the 14th Amendment.
Right.
So to this day, the ruling, Roe versus Wade, remains one of the most controversial
Yes.
Supreme Court decisions. And, I think what happens for a lot of women is that now that this has happened, which demographic is it going to affect, and how deeply is it going to affect women, and how far now do they have to go to actually have abortions?
Right. And I do want us to also um, expand because I was reading a few pieces around this, given the controversy last year with its overturning, and the expansion of it to not just include women, but individuals who are capable of carrying a pregnancy. And so thinking about what that means for that aspect of identity is crucial because we're not just thinking about the privacy of women, we're thinking about the privacy of those who identify as individuals who can carry a pregnancy, right? And I think that part of what we are seeing a lot in the space that you and I operate in on a daily basis of diversity, equity, and inclusion is the attack the assaults on identity and the ways in which individuals are seeking not just privacy, but also the ways in which individuals are seeking validation, safety when they're when they choose to be vulnerable, safety when they disclose varying aspects of identity, and what that does mean for the ways in which we show up and navigate our varying spaces. So thinking through the expansion of woman, the expansion of individual who can become pregnant,
Right.
and what that now means for the ways in which we are defining privacy and safety. So,
Right. And when you say identify, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
sure, sure. So this is often that space of like, ooh, that like, ooh, treading lightly.
Right.
But so from my space and understanding, when we are talking about identity and the ways in which people identify, we're speaking to the ways in which people view themselves, their own persona, the ways, the characteristics, or the illustrations, or the activities in which they see themselves um, feeling joy from, right? However, they can feel good about themselves, right? Then the spaces in which they navigate and do those things, they formulate identifying markers. And so, based on that, we then say, how do you identify? And when that person is allowed to reflect on the spaces they navigate, the things that they do, the ways in which they feel safe, the things that bring them joy, we hear certain characteristics or illustrations. And we have to honor those things, right? Just because you and I or other individuals may not glean joy from a certain experience or may not engage with certain people and be comfortable in doing so, doesn't mean that we can't, we're degrading anybody else's way of identifying. So it is a very nuanced approach, given the ways in which we are now giving more education and voice to individuals who have often been on the margins for so long, at least in our society. A lot of individuals have been marginalized because they identify in ways that are nuanced and not necessarily typical of what the American society has standardized as a norm. So I
Correct.
think it is necessary to honor that expansion of
And to
identity
include.
and to include and to ensure that the inclusion is consistent. Otherwise, we miss out on learning, we miss out on unique experiences, and we miss out on an evolutionary process of how we as a collective can grow and expand. So I think as as uncomfortable as it may be for some individuals and as new as it may be for others, I think it is still important to validate that aspect of an expansion of identity. Yeah.
Right. So, that brings us to another aspect of this conversation. Do you think this will have life-altering effects on those who can have children?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Given given my understanding and stories I have heard and conversations I have been in as to why individuals seek to have abortions, yes, the decision to overturn the ruling and to now make it criminal to do so will affect so many people in so many ways. It's the financial, it's the social advance that individuals seek. There's also, at the core as a psychologist, just the mental well-being, the mental
Right.
and emotional well-being and stability of individuals that this now compromises, particularly for individuals who were not given the opportunity to choose to
Choose.
become pregnant. So I think it is quite quite an upset and quite a very deep disappointment to have such a consideration made in the courtroom, for and there's so many ways to look at it. And I know for some people it's like, well, people need to make better choices with their bodies, da 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 da. And I think we're forgetting that a large portion of individuals who seek this type of service were never given choice, right? And it still happens today. We know we talk about the ruling in 1973, and for some people are like, oh, 1973 was so long ago type of thing, right? And it's not.
Right.
And the behaviors and the risks and the violations that were taking place then are still taking place now, even with the advance in access and resources that we have. People still have their choices stripped away from them, even when it comes to pregnancy. So this type of decision, I think, is, like I say, quite disruptive and very much a slap in the face of people who still are not able to actively engage in their own decision-making processes safely.
Right. And I think also what happens is that, as a collective, we as a collective believe that no one should have any rights over our body, our uterus. Literally, those decisions,
Yeah.
I strongly believe, don't need to be made by somebody outside of me.
Correct. I remember, so I'm an immigrant, proud immigrant. And I remember moving here to the US back in the early 2000s for college. And, you go through this whole kind of cultural orientation. And it's been over 20 years, and I still feel like I'm going through a cultural orientation when it comes to the US context. And I remember when I was first introduced to the Roe versus Wade situation, and I blurted out, because just me being me, I blurted out, what the hell does anybody business with what I do with my vagina? Like, why? Why is that the concern of a lawmaker?
Absolutely.
And then I thought to myself, but aren't lawmakers supposed to be working and advocating for my safety and on my behalf?
Correct.
So
Not
how are you
against it.
not against it, right? How
Right.
are you making a decision that goes against my safety and my right to exercise decision and choice?
Absolutely.
So and I still feel that way. I still feel that it is my responsibility to protect myself and to make good decisions and to be healthy. It is absolutely my responsibility to do that, and I am accountable for actions that happen after such decisions. However, in the case that my choice is taken away or I change my mind, right? Because people change their minds, men and women and everybody else in between changes their mind every 5 seconds. And you have again the right to do so. So it just really puzzles me when individuals who are elected and appointed to certain spaces decide to act of their own volition without deeply considering the circumstances under which many individuals have to make hard decisions in their own day-to-day lives. So,
Right.
yeah.
What do you think comes next for abortion rights during, this politically driven decision? Because it's a politically driven decision.
Yes, it is a heavily politically driven decision. And, conversations around it can take you anywhere from the control of Black and brown bodies all the way to the desire to encourage the promotion of white identity, right? And I say that because when we do look at the statistics, when the data really is dug up,
Right.
and we discuss who's having historically the trends
Right.
of rates of abortion, we see that the access has always been predominantly in white communities, and they have very high rates of abortion. And there is a concern for the fact that the birth rates in white communities are much lower
Right.
than those in Black and Brown and immigrant communities. So there is a fair component that is driving the politics, right? And I say that based on the readings. When that's when you look at the information and you kind of step back and say, well, what's really driving this major concern?
Mm.
There is an emotional component, as always. Politics is emotion, as much as people try and, it's emotion and it's religion, as much as we try and tease these things apart. Those are some big drivers behind political decisions. And fear drives a lot. So, given that kind of context with where some of these policies are coming from, I think it's gonna remain, and I think it's going to be something that becomes extremely stigmatized, even more so now than it is now, and it will become, I feel, another kind of public health type of crisis.
Crisis.
Honestly, um, we as a public health practitioner as well, I straddle my careers of public health and psychology in the DEI space. We're looking very much at racism as a public health crisis and concern. And I think, sexual justice, sexual health will also become another type of crisis, given the drivers of fear and political will and power retention and designation around this issue. So it will be something that will continue to be a disruption for many of us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And do you think it erodes our fundamental rights?
For those of us who believe in fundamental rights, it does, right? Because I think what individuals have come to understand as human rights has been skewed.
Mm.
I think the understanding of fundamental, when you put it all together, fundamental human rights within the American context has been very much manipulated because it only works for some. Those fundamental human rights only apply to some. And when you are operating with a consciousness that is larger than that, then you see the inequality and the inequity.
Right.
Right. And so, yes, it will continue to erode fundamental human rights for those of us who operate from that center of true
Right.
fundamental human rights. Yeah.
Mm. I'm going to read something here
Sure.
from a trusted source. It says the Supreme Court required the state to justify any interference with the right to access abortion by showing that it had a compelling interest, and held that no interest was compelling enough to ban abortion before viability. So, after the point of viability, the state could ban abortion or take other steps to promote its interest
Mhm.
in protecting the fetus.
Mhm.
Even after that point, however, abortion must be permitted to protect a patient's life and health.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you recognize the right to abortion, Roe was consistent with earlier Supreme Court rulings, recognizing a right of privacy that protects intimate and personal decisions, including those affecting child rearing, marriage, procreation, and the use of contraception from
Right.
governmental interference. So
Right.
here it says by guaranteeing the right to make decisions in pregnancy, Roe was critical in advancing gender equality in educational, economical, which is what you stated, and
Mm-hmm.
political spheres.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny that it did that, and now we're undoing that, right?
Right.
So it's so when we look at the conversation in our realm of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, individuals are some individuals are very much like, well, where is this coming from?
Mm,
All of a sudden, where is DEI? What is DEI about? This has nothing to
right.
do with me. And some individuals see it only as race relations. Many individuals think that DEI is just about race relations. Um, and it's clearly not. It is a lot more expansive. And in conversations I've had with individuals around the work that I do in this space, I tell people that DEI is nothing new. It is absolutely nothing new. You just read that piece a while ago, and clearly there was equality and equity and inclusion in that. When the law was first put in place, it gave and honored, again, leveraged those fundamental human rights to
Correct.
privacy, to health, to well being, to safety, which is what we're arguing about now.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about workspace, psychological safety and emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence and all those things. So DEI is not separate and apart. It is the way we operate. It
Correct.
is the way that we make decisions or don't. It is the way that we honor or don't individuals, right? And leverage assets. Because when you think about the ways in which someone may make a choice for their livelihood and their well being, to not get pregnant, right? To not have children. And they say, I can do better for my family, for my community, for my society at large without children. And some
Right.
people make that choice, and that is perfectly fine, right? And
But it's not a choice
now,
that's imposed on them.
and now, with the imposition of things, it complicates and compromises individuals who know that they would have been better off exercising the choice not to have children, right? And I think a lot of what a conversation I've been having too with a mentor of mine is this conversation around the imposition of things, the gaslighting of
Yeah.
things, right? And I have a post to do around that as well, because that is what I feel a lot of what it has been going on when we talk about safety and identity and things of that nature, and understanding why we are where we are. It's because of people succumbing to the consistent imposition of
Gaslighting,
insecurity, the constant
manipulation,
gaslight, the constant
undermining,
undermining,
unconscious
belittling,
biases.
all of that, right? That you can't make a choice. I have to make this choice for you,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I want you to come right back to work and go ahead. There's so many ways. Um, so I think it really fundamentally hits at the core of that, and further compromises um, people's ability to be intellectuals of their own making,
Mm,
right? Because people are smart. People know what they're capable of doing
absolutely. And not doing.
and not doing. So why impose on them to then have them now have to seek further assistance? And it's such a ripple effect. And then you stigmatize them even further for seeking those assistance. You know what
Right.
I mean? It's
Right.
vicious cycle.
Right.
Vicious cycle. Yeah.
And it's interesting because when we think of the ones that are making the decisions,
Hmm.
the ones that are making the decisions are not living our lives.
Absolutely. And they never will.
and they never will. And like you said, they're exercising and imposing their power
Mhm.
upon
Mhm.
those that
Mhm.
they believe cannot make decisions on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. And that has been, dare I say,
Mm,
that has been the historical mindset
right.
of the society. You
Absolutely.
you don't know what you're doing. You're not civilized enough
Right.
to know what you're actually doing. So
Right.
let me tell you what to do. And let
Well,
and while I'm telling you what to do, I'm also going to tell you who you are.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. What would be your parting words for the audience today?
Pay attention.
Mm,
Honestly, pay attention. Be informed. There's so much out there that is available. There's so much education and information that's out there.
right.
Right? And I think it is imperative for each and every one of us to hold ourselves to account,
Mm,
to be informed and critical. Critical thinking is so essential in the ways that we can support each other, the ways in which we can advocate for ourselves and others, and the ways in which we can grow and expand as a collective. So I think paying attention is important. Now, I don't mean sitting down glued to CNN and Fox News and NBC and MSNBC all day. No, 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 no. Don't traumatize yourself. Right? Because I don't watch the news for the sake of my mental and emotional well being.
I agree. I don't either.
Right? But I think it's important to read. I think it's
Absolutely.
important to listen to other people's perspective and gain information and be critical about it. Like, what does this mean for me? What does it
Mm,
mean for those I associate with?
right.
Right? Even if you can't readily resonate with something, what could it possibly mean for others that you're connected to, whether family, friends, colleagues, however you define connection.
Mm,
Um, it's important to pay attention and be informed. So that would be around this type of issue and other critical social issues as well, because we all have a part to play. People, I know a lot of people think, oh, well, this is bigger than me, right? I can't do anything about this, so
right.
I don't need to pay attention. But you'd be surprised just how your perspective can shape and support somebody that is going through something or trying to make a decision around something. So I think paying attention is important. And
Absolutely. And becoming self-aware is
yes,
yeah, so
absolutely. Self awareness. Oh my goodness. Self awareness all day. Because that is how you honor identity,
there you go. And
right?
reaffirm your identity.
Reaffirm your identity. So self awareness is absolutely essential. I think we're at a point where we need to stop taking on the imposition of
Mm,
things, right? And stop. I shared with you that the is it imposter or is it imposer, right? Are you really an imposter, or is it the fact that you have been so imposed upon that
mm,
you're now internalizing things and claiming what is really not yours,
exactly. And then recreating the narrative
creating a
that
narrative?
others have said about you because
Right,
now you've
right.
indoctrinated what you think they believe of you.
Exactly. When all the while it's an issue that they have. All the while.
Absolutely.
So it's
Amen.
important. Yeah, I think it's really important. And, even more important when it comes to this particular topic around your sexual identity and your sexual rights and
Mm,
emotional well being. Pay attention and honor who you are, and be critical about the resources that you're engaging with to
right.
advocate for yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This podcast highlights lived experiences and inspirational stories of strength and tenacity. We will share and continue to share courageous dialogues that influence DEI and emotional intelligence by breaking the barriers of stereotypes, confronting biases, and offering best practices to achieve a more significant and cultural mindset. Stay tuned as we continue to share our voices in the DEI space. To trend with us, hashtag diversity connects us. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
It's been a delight. Thank you, my lady.